Welcome to Lead with Intentions. I am your host, Ambereen Hameed. This show, as you know, is set out on an expedition to allow you to discover the best of who you are. It is my intention every single week to bring on guests that lead you to living a little bit more intentionally in your day to day while prioritizing what truly matters, which is our families. Before we dive in, I want to go ahead and welcome you to Spanglish Network and Zingo channels 250 and 251. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app on your respective devices, iOS, Android. Also, making sure that while you are downloading this app across even the Google Chromecast, the Amazon Fire Sticks, the Roku's, and any TV 2016 and beyond, that you rate and you respond and you let us know how we are doing. Give us some of that good feedback so we know what we're doing well, but more importantly, what we can do better for you. As we bring on guests every single week, I want you to know this platform is completely free. Download that app. Let us know how we are doing. Without further ado, I want to go ahead and welcome you, and I welcome our guest today, who is somebody that is a remarkable human being. I've had a few interactions with Haaris Qadri, and every single time I find out that he's such an influential and remarkable human, which is what today's intention is. So, when you are tuning in, it is important for all of us to realize what is our intention for the day. How do we want to show up every single moment of our day? So go ahead, set that up as we embark on this journey with a filmmaker who grew up in Canada and now resides in London. Yup, all the way to the other side. Haaris aims to make films that are seamlessly blending of authenticity, of naturalism, and vividly paints realism. His works delves into essence of everyday life, capturing the subtle moments that evoke deep emotions and hopefully a lot of good change. Haaris is drawn to diopic narratives exploring themes of identity, familial fragmentation, and nuances of intergenerational dynamics. His short film, Majboor Mahmool, recently screened at the Montreal Festival and won Best Canadian Short Film by the National Film Board of Canada. His movies have been screened at TIFF, Next Wave Film Festivals, the Canadian Film Festival, and recognized by Los Angeles Asian Pacific Film Festivals. As you know, we can keep diving into Haaris's credentials, but I do want to take a pause and let you guys, let him be on this show, just speaking from his own art and letting us know. How are you, Haaris? Welcome to our show.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for that warm introduction. Uh,
Yes.
yeah, so I'm on the other side of the world now, and in a place that is unfamiliar, and finding new pathways here. That yeah, just a brand new place for me. So a bit of finding myself in this as well.
Okay, I love that. Well, explain to us a little bit what it means to find yourself.
I think as a person and even as an artist, with each film I make or each film I write, parts of myself show, and it's a reflection of myself in that work itself. And I think now being in a new place where I don't necessarily have the all the credentials that you listed, like they kind of don't mean the same here.
Mm.
And it does kind of feel like starting from scratch as an artist and building new networks and creative circles. And also, this is a brand new experience for me, never having left home before. Uh, so what that means for me, and again, I guess being more intentional about how do I want to live right now, uh, and the independence that kind of comes with that. And I think that's what, in a nutshell, I know it doesn't go all over the place, but in a more condensed version.
But I do want to dive into all over the place because for me,
Mm.
it sounds like you're kind of reinventing yourself. So, as you're taking this journey on of reinventing yourself, how do you think you're going to lead with intentionality to build up the next best version of you?
I think part of my practice as an artist is to really think about what I want to do, and what do I want to say with this thing. And I think when I take that as a part of myself, and when I take that of the right now, and what I'm living, is not looking at it in a huge grand picture, but day to day. Uh, and I don't necessarily think I'm creating a new me in this process, you know. I think it's still doing everything I've been doing up until now, just in a different place. And part of that looks like making new friends. And I think that's not necessarily a new thing for me. I love walking into spaces and seeing if I can make a genuine connection by the time I leave, and not
Mm.
just not like in a not like in a networky or in a business kind of transactional way, but in a way of I would really want to hang out with this person after. And I think all those small, minute practices that I do back home, it's just in a place now where uh, I really don't know anyone here, in these places,
Mm.
in these creative circles. And I think when I'm living intentionally with that, it's just, well, I really want to make new friends here, and I really want to make something here. Uh, and one thing that I love about film, and the kind of filmmaking that I'm interested in, it is collaborative in nature, and you
Mm.
can't do it alone. So you want to make sure that you make meaningful uh, relationships with people that I want to make like-minded work with. So I think
Mm.
with that in mind, that's how I'm kind of living intentionally.
Okay, so let's dive in a little bit more into that because now you're talking about a lot of things that people who are listening, I want to go ahead and thank our audience members once again for tuning in and watching this show. When you're talking about, maybe we have people who are listening who are really trying to figure out, I've relocated or my old friend circle no longer serves me anymore. What are some things that you look at to actually build a friendship where you said there's just this essence of connection?
Do you mean that in a strictly friendship way, and also in a friendship that might be a working relationship with?
Hey, I think evolution is amazing.
I think that, well, one, I wouldn't say that the friends and collaborators I have back home are still very much a part of my life. And even as I write my next project, uh, these are people who I've had longstanding relationships with years. And, so they're people I trust. Uh, but I think one thing that I look for, and I agree, like I am all for making great friends. And I think one thing that I really keep in mind when I'm making friends, it shouldn't feel forced in a sense. Like and I think some of those things, some of those qualities and traits of what you look for friendships are almost unexplainable, in a sense of when you know,
Mm,
you just know that so you've hit it right, you know, that there's something about this person that I want to be around them, or I want to hang out with them. I think in moments where these might be collaborators, I am more particular about. And what that means is shared vision for simple things like labor ethics, in terms of, okay, how many hours are we working on this? Whether uh, how whether the space feels safe for everyone, in terms of ideas, in terms of just being, you know, uh, an overall like shared kind of vision about what are we interested in making.
mm,
Uh, and I think those, in a strange way, when it comes to people that I want to work with, uh, I'm way more particular, because, again, the collaborative nature of it, you have to make sure that it fits, and it should fit like a puzzle. Uh,
mm-hmm,
and each person that you bring on to a production, you want to make sure that it all works. And I think most of, like, on bigger sets where you have hundreds and hundreds of people, you can't necessarily do that with the same intention, same focus.
mm-hmm.
But how I'm leading my practice is smaller sets. One, kind of, I don't really have an option, but two, I also really like working in that way.
Yeah,
So those are things that I'm more particular about, and I think those are the traits that I'm looking for.
yeah. I think exactly what you said, right? When you know, you just know. And I feel like that can be in a collaboration with work, that could just be random people that you meet. So when you are talking about when you just know, what are some values that you think would benefit our users or our, our audience members who are listening right now? What are some values that you think are at the center of great friendships?
Uh, Coming back to the word intention, I think when it shows that there's a meaningful reciprocation and love that again isn't transactional but feels genuine, and the want
Mm,
to be a part of this person's life. uh and it almost sounds like in a romantic sense, but I do think there is that beauty that exists within friendships. You show up for each other. uh and time and time again, from when I think about all my friends, from some friends that I still maintain contact with since like elementary school, even if we don't speak every day, or even if we don't speak months at a time, we show up for each other in certain ways. Whether
mm,
that'll be one random day where they really need a phone call, and we talk and catch up, uh, or just like a simple errand to run and they need some help. Uh,
yeah.
and I think you want to water those relationships, and it
Mm,
shouldn't be something where they're obsolete for months on end only when you need something. And I think there's a clear distinction between having relationships that aren't uh, contingent on having to do that. So yeah, I don't know if that answers it quite, but
Hey, there's no right answer. The answer is whatever you pour into us. I think
mhm,
it's a beautiful blend of what you're saying. Yesterday, I was talking to one of my ex coworkers who is, who literally turned out to say, "I'm your daughter," and and it was this like this fun moment when I used to be with her. How I almost became like her mentor, but I
mm,
haven't spoken with her for for a while now, for at least 8 9 months. And she said, "You're crossing my mind a lot, so I want to get on a phone with you." And yesterday we spoke, and it's just that she said, "I didn't need to keep connecting with you, but when we connected, it was like we picked up right where we left off."
mm,
So it's this beautiful balance of pouring when you need to pour in water, and then when maybe you get busy with life, maybe you have other priorities, maybe some things happens where you're not able to give as much as you want in your friendships, then that's okay too. And I think that's a beautiful balance. Haaris, can you tell us something personal about yourself, which would allow myself and the audience here the opportunity to get to know you a little bit better?
yeah, sure. I'm trying to think about what that specifically would be. Uh, I mean, I think I can tie it back to kind of how I was introduced on the show, which is I entered filmmaking on a whim, and I didn't know I wanted to be a filmmaker. And don't get me wrong, I love the medium, but there's something that I read from one of my most looked up to film directors. He's an Iranian film director named Abbas Kiarostami, and in one of his interviews, he spoke about how if someone took away filmmaking from him, uh, he'd still be able to live. He'd be fine. He'd find something else to do. And I love the medium, but I think I feel the same, and it's
Mm,
important to me. But yeah, I do recognize that it's not something that I necessarily aspired for since being a kid. And I think there's this romanticism and thing that you see where it's like Spielberg knew he wanted to be a director at the age of 6, and like all the great masterminds of this craft, you kind of see they've been thinking about it since they were children, and that's not me. Uh, so I think that's something that I keep in mind and tell people that I'm not this masterful or all knowing about cinema. And there's so many people I look up to in my friend groups and collaborators that I will go to when I need help. But that's not me.
mm. Okay, I actually want to dive in a little bit deeper because my mind's
Okay.
provoking a ton of wonderful thoughts. We know this from research. The most important thing in a human being's life that kind of equates to happiness, fulfillment at the end of life, is the essence of relationships, right?
Hmm.
And I love that you've dived in and you've dove in and said, kind of my filmmaking is a part of who I am. And if it didn't exist, I would still be okay. Yet I aspire to look up to other people who are mentors. And I want to dive in a little bit to really understand this because I don't think that enough people seek mentorship. And I don't look at mentorship as something that's like only work related. um, so tell me a little bit about how have the mentors sculpted you and helped you to find yourself, find your rhythm, or find your voice?
Oh, that's a great question. So, uh, I think this goes back a little. I think when I can think about my first mentor, it would have been in 2016, and this would have been right after my first year in film school. I was feeling kind of hopeless. You don't see many Black Indigenous people of color on Canadian productions, or at that time,
Mm,
I didn't really realize that the minority groups are making films. And my first year of university didn't help with that. And I found this great film festival called Toronto Real Asian International Film Festival, and they had a summer incubator called Unsung Voices for emerging filmmakers. I applied, got in, and that was the first time I really had a mentorship in a personal level where I came in with this film idea, and I was passionate about making this film, but I just needed help on how to do it. And my two mentors were Amar Kishodia. He is now a programmer at TIFF, and another brilliant Canadian filmmaker named Brandon Lokita. Uh, and they, oh man, just in terms of from creative support, looking at drafts of scripts and giving
mm,
feedback, to even just being like, I was what, 18 years old, hadn't really been on set, and now I had to direct for the first time and run a set. And just the support, the moral support, where it's like, you can do this, we'll be
mm,
there to watch, and if you have any problem, we got your back. Whether it's
mm,
something like someone forgot to pick up a piece of equipment, we'll go run that for you. Making me feel so supported, and then that process. And I think mentorship looks so different depending on the stage you're in. Uh, that was really early career for me, and that mentorship was not just, it became a friendship after the fact, after the program ended.
mm.
And these are people that to this day, when I'm working on something new, when I feel like it's polished enough, I go back to them for feedback. Uh, and it's crazy to think that they've seen how far I've come in terms of like my style of how I'm working with things, and but that's important to me. And then when I think about later mentorships I have, there's a filmmaker by the name of Zarar Khan, who I'm kind of absolutely brilliant Pakistani Canadian director. His film In Flames is currently showing actually in New York, but it was at Cannes, was at TIFF, was at all over the world, traveling everywhere with this
Mm,
film. But he is currently mentoring me with a new project I'm working on, and this is like purely like, okay, well, what do you want to do with this film? What's your goal?
mm,
And how can I help you figure that out? So from getting feedback on how do I fund this thing? How do I apply for these grants? This is a whole new world to me. And him kind of being like, this is everything I've done. Uh, Take a look at it and do what you want with it. But I'm not gonna hold your hand in this process anymore. You know what you're doing.
mm,
But if you have questions, I'm here to answer them. And it looks so different from my earlier mentorships where I actually needed moral support and like, oh, how do I do this? And I'm going to you not only as like this person who will help me make this thing, but help me emotionally during the process. Uh,
yeah.
so it looks really different. But oh, like the common thread of all these great mentors I've had in my life is just their willingness to really help and see you succeed, you know?
Mm. I love that. By the way, I am looking down, but I am taking notes. As all of you know, I hope you guys got your notebook out, and it's so important. I think when we are having a conversation, to really just take those nuggets, right? So willingness to help you see succeed, and that's the ultimate gift, right? Is like, hey, we got your back. If you fall, we'll help you up. But now you're in a place where I'm just gonna give you a map, okay? And you take the route that you want. How do you know, Haaris? what that next best project is for you. Like, how do you dissect that? How do you get inspiration? How do you let your imagination run wild to be able to create something from scratch?
I think I say this every time I ask this question is that I know people who are amazing creatives that have like a box full of ideas. I'm not that person. An idea will come to me ever so rarely, and my whole ethos with how do I know I want to make something is that if I think of something I want to make, I won't write it down. If I still remember it the next day, that means it's worth writing down. Uh, so
Mm.
currently, I think I have two things written down. One of which I'm making. The next one isn't as fleshed out, but I know at some point it'll come to me. But right now, what I'm interested in as a filmmaker is family dramas, and that ties into uh, dramas of diaspora communities, specifically right now South Asian communities. Really going into the write what you know based off of
Mm.
experiences and what you've seen. Uh, but that whole writing down thing is definitely important to me. And I think there was at one point uh, in time where I became so strung up on what success looks like as a filmmaker. And I think for filmmakers, we look at film festivals as being this token of validation, whether your film
Mm.
gets seen at so and so city. Uh, and I get it. There is something really important as a filmmaker if you want financial success and even attain the opportunities to make more films. That is important. But then you sometimes get hung up on the idea of is this film good for that festival? Like, am I making this
Mm.
film for this festival instead of yourself? And I think there was a point in time where I was thinking like that, and I think I've realized now that's not how it works. Uh,
Mm.
and I want to make what I'm interested in, and if a festival finds it interesting that they want to screen, great. But I'm not gonna make it as part of this model of how do you like it almost feels formulaic and it almost feels like you're making this concoction. And I don't think that's what interests me in filmmaking. Uh, so it's just really like, do I feel connected to this? Do I really want to tell this?
Mm.
And part of that's so internal. Whereas again, I'm drawn to the ordinary and slice of lives. And I
Mm.
think it's thinking about what's important in that, and then being so interested in relationships and what families look like. Uh, yeah,
I love that we're diving in. Like we've evolved this conversation so much, right? From this understanding of I'm trying to figure out where I'm at in life. I'm in a brand new place to friendships, to mentorships. Now really diving into not only finding your voice, but I find it so profound and fascinating when you're a young guy, when you're able to detach from the outcome. Because I really want our audience members who are here listening, I want them to actually know that they don't need to seek validation, right? They gotta have to go back to those feelings and that the internal connection. How did you get to that point at such a young age?
I I think it would be great if I got to that stage at a young age. I think I haven't gotten there, and I'll be honest that it does really suck when you get that festival rejection, uh, and it really sucks when you get that email that says no, you didn't receive this mentorship or you didn't receive this fund,
Mm.
uh, and it's tough, and those rejections still sting. Uh, but I think I've gotten better at realizing that doesn't mean that my work isn't important. That doesn't mean that my voice as a filmmaker isn't good enough. But then also just understanding the realism in terms of that, like it's not all tied down to that. I think being on the other side of filmmaking and uh, having done some programming work, is you realize that it's so many factors. Like for a film festival, it could be what's the theme for this year's
Mm.
program. It could be, do we want to support more local talent in our city, or do we want more international voices this time around? And then sometimes it could be that, oh, the programmer knows so and so, this filmmaker, so we're going to screen their work. And it sounds awful. Sometimes it is solely down to nepotism, but there are other times where you can get in based off the merit of your work and whether it connects with that year's theme. But there's so many factors, and I think realizing that grounds you, and it reassures you that it's not that. Uh, and I think that, like how I mentioned earlier, it disheartens you as a filmmaker when you don't get that validation, because you worry whether am I going to be able to make the next thing without it. Uh,
Mm.
and I do think that when I talk about, yeah, you can't let it all be determined by that validation, but it is also easy for me to say because I've had attained some of that validation, you know. And when I think about other filmmakers that I've spoken to in Toronto that tell me like, how did you get that fund, or like, what can I do? Uh, and they also say, well, you've screened at these places, so maybe that's why you've gotten it. And I can't discredit that. That is part of it, and that's how the industry kind of works. Uh, so it's a, it's important, but you can't let that define you. And it's a battle every time you finish something, or it's a battle every time you want to make something and receive funding for it. Uh, I think just being aware of that and reminding yourself that
Mm.
is so important. And I bring back my mentor Randall Akita. When I made my last short Majbura Mamul, I had really hoped it would have gotten into really big festivals, and that first wave of rejections stung so bad. And I had to call up Randall and be like,
Mm.
Randall, like, does my film suck? Like, what's going on? And then he kind of reminded me, and he saw the film, and he had really great things to say about it. And it, like, I know there's truth to it, because all
Mm.
these years I've been mentored by him. He's given me such honest feedback about my work. So I know it really resonated with him. I know he liked it. And he reminded me
Yeah.
that, listen, you look up to me. I've screened so many places, but I have other projects that didn't do so well on that industry
Mm.
validation point. You can't let that define you. So that was the probably the first real realization of that.
Yeah, I think it's point on when you say that realizing, recognizing, that it's there, being aware to it, but not being connected or not letting that define you. I think it's such a difficult place that we as humans, find ourselves. So you talked a little bit about, for the center of, your filmmaking is a lot more family oriented experience that you've gone through in your own life. So help me understand and, help our audience member understand something, a personal share about your family, which will kind of let us dive into your world, especially when it comes to this, this beautiful relationship.
I think as a first generation child of an immigrant, I think this kind of goes across, like, not even just South Asian communities, but so many children
Mm-hmm.
of immigrants. We have one, that hybrid of culture, being from there and being from here at the same time, and that's part of your identity. Again, like that Canadian American Pakistani identity, that hyphenated identity is part of me. And then uh, when it comes to specifically South Asian stories, that, like, in relation to my family, is there's certain expectations that children have in terms of being seen to be caretakers of their parents, and uh,
Mm.
sometimes it looks across like being their translator, or being not just a child uh, in some cases, and then even in terms of like, oh, that's a hard question. You know what? I'm thinking about it, and I think one of the things that's so important to my practice is also breaking those stereotypes, that already exist in terms of like the tiger Asian moms and things like that that exist within like American mainstream media, and realizing that sometimes there is truth to the stereotypes, and that does make it part of our identity. Like,
Mm.
but also that, again, going back to, that doesn't define us. That's just one facet of life. So when we talk about like what South Asian stories look like, and what I'm interested in, families are so rooted, like, in our culture, where uh, you're always thinking about family, and there is this closeness, and we take care of each other, and it takes a village, uh, but that's one facet of it. And I think with my next project, what I'm interested in is showing that sometimes it can look perfect, but it's fragmented.
Mm.
And just like any other family, you know. But I think putting a lens on it that we aren't quite seeing in mainstream representations of us. When I
Mm-hmm.
think about Asian American representations, like, and this isn't specifically South Asian, but Everything Everywhere All at Once, Lulu Wang's The Farewell, Minari, you have these all movies centered around families and the relationships we have with our parents. Uh, and they've kind of done this thing where they're showing that, like, yeah, we have family problems just like everyone else. You know, like I
Yeah.
may not get along with my mother, just like that American family that we've seen like movies about again and again. It's just this time with a different cultural perspective, you know? And I think that's what's kind of important to me.
Hmm. I mean, I think that's so brilliant because I too, like am from a very similar background, right? I am an immigrant, so my kids are first generation, and it's like this blend of how much of the culture do I preserve, and how much flexibility do I bring forth, where they can also assimilate to this one and not feel like they're not part of it. Um, so as you've grown up, what do you think are some beautiful family values, that come from the culture that you would love to carry forth?
I think again the care for our parents, and I think that I explore this in my last film, where it's about a daughter who takes her mom for a doctor's appointment, uh, and it plays out in four acts. The daughter taking her mom in the car. They get to the doctor's office and they're in the reception area. Then they're waiting for the doctor to come, and then the drive back home. But it shows how, as like, we care for our parents and they can frustrate us, and sometimes it feels almost burdensome at times
Mm,
where there's this expectation to have to care for them, and we love our parents, but sometimes it just feels like, can we just be the children for once? Uh,
mm,
but it it's a balance of both, and you go back and forth between those feelings. But at the core of it, it is we love and take care of our parents, and I think that's something that's really important to me as a person and as a filmmaker to show that relationship properly. Because again, like what we have in the mainstream about that is like parents being overbearing and like the children just kind of being like, forget that, you know, like I don't want to be that. Uh, and I think it's like an internal battle at times,
mhm.
but uh, there is, I think, overall that feeling of, yeah, that's important to us as a community echoes. Uh,
Yeah, I did watch Majboor e Mamool, the movie we're talking about here, and it is brilliant. The acting is point on. You're like, how long have they been doing this, right? Like, I found myself, in that script. Brilliantly written too, I would say. Is It's such a simple interaction, but it speaks volumes. Even
thank you.
like the fact that she was tapping, on the steering wheel at one point in time, we could just see the elevation and the frustration, you know, in the actor's demeanor, which I'm like, brilliantly depicted, because that's super rare to be able to captivate and capture. Like you kind of felt sucked in to be like, is that how I do it? Is that how my kid feels? And all these questions that come up. And I wouldn't say this is only specific to, the South Asian community or immigrant parents. I think all families face these challenges where sometimes the parents have expectations that they want love and care, but I don't think it's been defined, as something that's needed. So you've said a little bit about how your family is so important to you and how it's kind of part of who you are growing up. Let us know, like, let us tap into your world a little bit. How was that home dynamics for you?
I have one older sister, 3 years older, and then my mom and dad living together, and it's strange. Like I feel like we grew up with family being really important, but most of our family living in the States. So you get only burst of everyone all together for certain periods of times, but other than that, it felt really nuclear family. Uh,
Mm,
had some family friends. We still have those family friends outside of our circle, but it didn't feel like there's this whole sense of community that when I go back to New York or when I go to Chicago, uh, these communities that my family's there have, it doesn't feel like that at all, and it does feel more nuclear. And I guess in that sense, you have less people to see and to go to, and then be a part of your lives all the time, at least, that aren't there in short bursts. Uh, and I think growing up, there were like certain gender roles and expectations that you see, and you work towards breaking. Some things
Mm,
that didn't sit right with me or my sister growing up, and we think about, well, what do we want to do? And uh, yeah, but I think the benefit of that was that at times there was it almost like a no is no from parents, kind of feels like that's it, and you don't have other family
mhm.
members to be like, hey, can you convince them that, like, to like, you don't
Yeah.
necessarily have that pull. uh but in other times, like, it's almost less people to have to convince if you want to do this thing. uh
Mm,
like when I think about uh families back home, like if they have, like if one person wants to go to college somewhere else, it becomes a whole thing. If there's other families all in one city, it becomes this, we're going to collaborate again, the whole it takes a village mentality, and which I love. But I didn't have that. It was just getting approval from my mom and dad, or sometimes just even getting approval from one of them was enough.
mm.
uh, but way more nuclear. And I think that's something that comes back to my work too, where it's like it's not focusing on all these people, but really micro, and really honing in, and also thinking about like taking elements of that and also fictionalizing it as well. Uh, but I think that that closeness or that immediacy of like having these only people around you, being a big factor probably into what family looks like for me.
Yeah, so you talked about a little bit, that you guys face challenges or there were difficulties, and it was like either you're convincing or you're not, as a flat out no. What's the one theme, or one challenge that you would say came up quite a few times, for you, in your home?
I think it was, well, not think, I think I know this. It's wanting to do what you want to do, and not from a selfish point of view, but from, if the vision doesn't align, then getting to do that becomes difficult. And I think like this can easily extend to just me as a filmmaker. When I had the threat of maybe I want to pursue filmmaking and maybe I wanted to do this for post secondary education,
Yeah.
uh, that being a battle. Uh, and
Mm.
there wasn't shared alignment of what my dad in this case wanted for me, and what I wanted for me. Uh, so that being like one challenge, but I think it all comes back to like, what do they see for you, and what do I see for me?
Mm. Okay.
Uh, yeah.
I love that. Let's dive in. Let's keep diving, because I know a lot of audience members who are here listening may either have faced this or are facing this right now, or will have kids who are going to think really differently. So let's bridge that gap. Let's kind of help them identify how much of it do you let go of, and when is it something that you're like, no, this is kind of something there's like there are no ifs and buts about. Where's that beautiful blend to just say, you know what, this feels so authentic, this feels so true to who I am, it's like my inner calling, even if it is for right now. I have to pursue this even if I make a few people mad or disappoint my family.
I think it's strange. I think we think about what we want to do in post secondary as one of like the most important decisions of our life, because you might be pursuing that for years if you're going to post secondary. And when you think about it, it's really awful that you make a 17-year-old think about this one decision might like weigh everything, you know? Uh, and I think that you allow yourself, and I think parents should also allow kids to make mistakes and learn from it. And also be a space where it's like, hey, I've made a mistake. Can I go back on this?
Mm-hmm.
I think as much as it drives me crazy to say that, oh, if like film didn't work out for me, if I went to my dad and be like, hey, I think I want to pursue something else, he'd be like, okay, great. You know, maybe for him it's just like a time. Don't waste time. That's always the thing it comes back to. Uh, but I think as a person and as I think as a young person, feeling what's important to not give up on, I think it comes back to when you know. And I think sometimes those feelings might be wrong, and it's okay for it to be
Mm,
wrong. You might have been really passionate about it. But if you come to the realization later on that, you know what, that I thought I knew, and you probably did, you were sure of that moment, but things change, and you allow
mm-hmm,
yourself uh, to not feel like you're compelled to have to stick it through with any decision you make. There is impermanence, you know. Uh, to still be intentional about those decisions, and you can think it as best as you can. You can really know that I don't want to let this go and act on it. Like, I'm not saying that people should give up on it, but also if you come to a realization that no, it wasn't, that's okay. You
mm.
When you know, but also to that same extent, you can also know and know when it's not for you anymore.
Yeah, I think that's essential, right? I think allowing ourselves that grace to say, in this moment, or in the next little bit, this just feels so right for my heart, for my soul. It just feels like this is what I'm meant to do. But then allowing grace to enter and say, no, that's where the journey ends. And I think many of us don't do that gracefully. A lot of that shame and a lot of that anger and that bitterness comes in, whether that be going back to our family and saying, I failed, or I made a mistake. I try to help people figure out that that wasn't a mistake, right? I almost feel like you needed that. You needed that as a part of your journey for whatever that future is, Um, when you see yourself in your future, Haaris, what's what's gonna bring you that success, that joy, that happiness element? Where is that? Where's that for you?
Uh, it's strange. At the same time, where I just like previously said, like, oh, if you took away filmmaking from me, I'd be okay. Uh, but I want to make things. And when I think about the future, I want to make a full feature length film. Uh, and I want to be able to keep making films because that's something that I want to do. And I think
Hmm.
that's what I see in the future for myself. And I think that will, yeah, festival value. Like I talked about all of that, but I think success for me looks like is if I get to make a feature. Making a feature isn't an easy thing. And even being
Hmm.
able to make a feature in a way that where I feel like is ethical and is labor conscious and all these things are so important to me, it is going to be like an uphill battle to be able to do it. And I think when I finally do it, I'll feel like I've have some success that I kind of dreamed of. I think about when I was in my last year of film school, prof asked me to write down where you see yourself in. I think it was 10 years, and I think I wrote on that note that I will have made a first feature by then. Uh, and I'm not fussed on timelines and certain things like that. I think I've come to learn from that you can't put life in these parameters of by this I'm going to achieve that. But no, I feel like I'm so close to being able to make a feature. Uh, I'm writing one now, like in the most earliest stages of writing one now. Uh, but I think that's what's for me in the next few years.
Yeah, I think that's it's brilliant. I think a lot of times there's some values that we all live by, and so for me, faith and patience is kind of the pinnacle of it. But with patience, there is so much that's required. And when you're talking about knowing I want to achieve this but not having like a timeline around it, how do you help our audience members who are listening, and even me, how do you help us dissect to not be so timeline focused when everyone says goals are measured around a timeline and achieved within that too?
I think again when you just look out of yourself and when you look out to the world, you realize that there's so many brilliant minds that have made things at different points of their lives. You know,
Mm,
uh, some filmmakers got their start when they were in their 40s or 50s, and there's some filmmakers who were 21 when they made Dil Wale Dulhaniyan Le Jayenge. That guy was like 21, 22 when he made that film. And I think it looks different for everyone. Uh, and I think just when you look outside and stop being so inner focused, it helps.
Yeah.
Uh, mm,
Finding the extraordinary in the ordinary, I think, is such a brilliant way to embrace life, which I think honestly many of us don't do. This conversation, we've been at it for about 45 minutes. It doesn't seem like it, but we are. I do want to ask you, how does our audience members, how do people who really took something from you or who just want to get in touch with you or who think that, maybe Haaris can be a great mentor for me, how do they get in touch with you?
you could reach me through my website at haarisqadri.com, spelled HAARISQADRI.com. Also, with that same handle on Instagram at Haaris Qadri. It's the best way to reach me. And yeah, yeah, I think I'm not a slow responder, so I can get in touch with people who ever reply, but that's the best
Yeah,
way to
and
reach
as
me.
we know, Haaris is seeking friendships, So if this is somebody who you feel like, oh wow, he's in the vicinity of London, I would love to go and grab some coffee. I too have done that with Haaris, and it's been a really fun, fun connect, I would say. So I want to ask you, in this show, I'm trying to create this fun ritual at the end of it. These are called the intentional raps or the rapid fires. When I ask you a set of questions that I want you to
Mhm.
answer in one word or in one sentence. And I think this gives us an understanding of like who you truly are, Haaris. Ready to dive in?
Sure.
All
Let's do
right.
this.
What do you want to leave behind for the world, Haaris?
Films.
Okay. How will you know that you've led an intentional life?
Oh man, it's supposed to be rapid fire. Whoa. When I can be happy with the decisions I've made.
I love that. If you can create one law that everyone in the world had to follow, what would that law be?
Oh, this is supposed to be rapid fire. I'm thinking way too into this.
No,
Maybe
I
at
I
least.
mean, go ahead.
Oh man. Oh.
This is a tough one. Everyone stumbles upon this one, so give yourself a ton of grace.
I think to be able to donate a certain percentage of wealth to impoverished people.
Hmm. Okay, so distribution of wealth. I love that.
Yeah,
Okay,
distribution of wealth.
there you go. All right. What is one lesson that you want to share with us, which has made you who you are today?
To slow down, uh, and to really realize. I think honestly, going back to the whole success and validation and what that looks like, uh, not tying your worth to organizations or even like to certain people in your life's view of who you are.
Mhm.
Uh, and it's important to look outwards, but you can't define yourself with that. Uh, and having some certainty of who you are as a person.
Love that. Yeah, I think slowing down is key, especially in the world that we live in now, where everything is so fast paced, right? At least in
Mm,
London, you get to walk a little bit. Not here in the US, we don't as
yeah.
much. What would you say, Haaris, is the key to a healthy relationship?
Uh, Setting healthy expectations for
Hmm.
people.
Okay. Love that. Well, thank you so very much, Haaris, for coming along on this journey with us. today it was, I think the conversation, it was beautiful. And for anyone who wants to reach Haaris, we all know, get into that Qadri .com or on Instagram as well. I think this was a beautiful conversation. I thank you so much for your openness. Um, for all of you who have tuned in thus far and who have heard this, please, please, please share what resonates with you, because that really helps us see how much of an impact we here are making in your lives. This show can also be heard on Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out spanglishworld.ca for all the news and the programming. Spanglish World, watch it, hear it, read it, download it. Most importantly, live into it with intentionality to make a better version of you.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.